What's the haps? I'm Maroka, and let's talk about the new equipment within Spiral Knights, shall we? So this past Wednesday, 3 Rings dropped an update on the game, which was a promo, which surprised nobody whatsoever. This is in fact a repeat of a promo which has been before. This is the Battle Chef promo. So where previously you could get a chef's outfit and a chef's hat, now you can get them in a few new colours. There's some yellow, a pink and a purple. They're kind of a bright confectionery kind of colours, I suppose, is what's going on there. And they look a little different to the previous ones, but ultimately it's the same thing reskinned. Now, what's different about this particular promo, what makes it stand out, and the reason everybody wants to talk about it at the moment, is it includes some new equipment. So we've got the Power Mitt, which is kind of an oven glove looking thing, and it functions as a shield. It is statistically similar to the heater shield, but comes with fire resist instead of freeze resist. Ultimately, it is rather outclassed by a number of the other shields that are already in the game. As I say, it's fire resist, so there's already other shields out there with fire and other resistances. The Owlite shield, for example, comes with fire and shock, so it's already inferior to other shields. So it's not necessarily such a big deal that this has been added to the game. The other item in the promo, however, is a little bit more controversial. We've got the Overcharged Mix Master, which is a gun that looks a lot like a mixer. It's kitchen utensils, as it were, obviously, is the theme of the day. What does this Mix Master do? It fires 3 shots of 2 projectiles. These are visually kind of similar to the Win Millions ones. They sort of weave about a bit and explode on impact. They can inflict shock when they do. And the most interesting part is that they boomerang back to the user. So you fire off your gun, 2 projectiles leave your gun, they'll sort of swirl around a bit, and then they will return to you, which is entirely unique and a completely new mechanic that we've never seen from any other gun in the game so far. So this leads to a lot of interesting new uses. The reports I'm hearing from the forums, obviously I'm not a Lockdown player, but a lot of Lockdown players are reporting that this gun is pretty powerful as a weapon in Lockdown. Basically, there's probably an element of it's untested in there. I mean, other people have not yet come to terms with ways to effectively counter it, but at the same time, it's also people who have previously done fairly average are now coming back and saying, yeah, I can do really, really well in Lockdown just by using this gun, and just that. The projectiles are rather difficult to dodge because they're moving around a lot. They're inflicting shock, which is fairly debilitating, and on top of that, if you try and get in close to somebody who has already fired these projectiles, the projectiles are going to come back to them and explode on them, meaning the gun will return and hit people who are in melee range, so it's fairly potent in that regard. And the issue with this gun arises insofar as, well, it comes from a prize box, which means that, if not you, then someone somewhere in the game has had to put down some real money in order to make this thing become a thing. This gun is not a reskin. Literally, the only way to acquire this gun is for somebody to have paid for it, which raises an interesting issue. This is technically not the first kind of content that has done this. I mean, initially, that criticism could have been quite easily leveled at Operation Crimson Hammer, which obviously required you to buy it as a DLC purchase, then gave you 2 new weapons within it for completing the missions, others if you want to count the lower level ones, but 2 functionally different weapons, and if you didn't make that purchase, you didn't have access to those weapons. It was as simple as that. Now you can purchase that from Energy, and you can still make the argument that someone somewhere had to purchase that Energy in the first place, which is technically true. Someone somewhere had to do a real money transaction for you to be able to acquire Operation Crimson Hammer, but it's a lot more accessible than this one particularly, because Energy is a widely used currency and it's widely accepted for a lot of things in the game. It's something that is in circulation a lot. So we also had back in the, would it have been the Equinox? I think it was the Equinox promotion. We had a shield that came out that again was unique, but not necessarily amazing insofar as like the Power Mitt is not a particularly effective shield. We also had the Celestial Shield, which had piercing and shadow resistance on it, and as such had fairly limited functionality within the Clockworks. There's very few circumstances when you're going to particularly be looking for something with both shadow and piercing. You might occasionally get that in the occasional compound, but for the most part you're probably going to want to go with a little bit more of a specific shield than a kind of trying to protect against everything shield, because that just doesn't tend to work out too well for you. So we've got 2 shields in the game that are only available through real money transactions, one which is no longer available, one which as of the 9th of September will no longer be available other than through other players, neither of which anybody's particularly concerned about owning because they're not terribly effective. However, we've now got a gun in the game which will no longer be available after the 9th of September, which is actually a really good weapon that people really want, and that raises issues because that basically means there are now a limited number of these guns in the game, and the price of them will only go up, and they're a very, very prestigious item. Given its alleged superior combat effectiveness, especially within PvP situations, it's very, very easy to make the claim that this weapon is, well, effectively, a pay-to-win weapon, which is something that people have made claims about Spiral Knights being pay-to-win in the past, but those claims are always very easily dismissed. Up till now, all the content, all the reasonably useful and balanced content, has always been accessible to everybody. You could never comfortably make the claim that Spiral Knights was pay-to-win. It has always been very, very fair in what it's done, and that's part of the reason I've always liked this game, and I believe a great many people. And all of a sudden now we're seeing the first piece of content, potentially future ones, that now you have to pay money for, which suddenly you can win effectively with it. You can pay to win. Well, that raises some more issues then. Suddenly the game's taking a route that perhaps players might not like so much. Now, one of the worst parts of this is that it's definitely going to set a bad precedent. This is one of the most interesting promos they've done in a while just by virtue of this fact. And people will and are buying it. People want this gun. I'll be honest, I was tempted to buy these guns, or at least tempted to buy some boxes to try and get the gun at any rate. I would like to have had a go, but at the same time, it's also the gambling issue, which, quite frankly, I don't like. I've disapproved of these new prize box promos since they've started changing the format to the new buy the boxes separately. That's not something I've ever particularly approved of. This is something that seems to have come over from your Asian free-to-play games. A lot of your Korean and Japanese, I think, MMOs have tended to rely on these kind of mechanics, the gambling mechanics, as it were. It's basically, you put down some money and you get a token, you put your token in the slot, and then the magic machine will spit out a capsule or whatever, or get a lockbox, or the formats vary, but the functionality is essentially the same. You pay down some money and you get one shot at getting some rarities, and chances are you're not going to get that rarity, and you've got to keep putting money into the machine, keep putting coins into the slot, until eventually you get the thing that you want. And if you're lucky, in Spiral Knight's case, at least you've always had the option to buy it from other players at a considerable price usually, but nonetheless the option was there. In many of these games the option was not there. Fortunately, we haven't gone that far down that route yet. We aren't at the point where the only way to get the gun is to keep throwing money at the developers until eventually, randomly, you'll get it. Fortunately, now we still can buy these from other players, but it's potentially a slippery slope. If we're already treading that territory, we're already getting a little bit more greedy. We've implemented the gambling, and now we've implemented gambling for items that are actually useful and not cosmetic. It's kind of slowly treading the path of going into territory that's just not very useful to the consumer. It's not very friendly to the consumer. These are not things you would want in your game. And again, people will buy into this promo because, hey, new shinies. We haven't had any new shinies in ages. This is well, I suppose the Tortodrome promo, certainly, but again, that was a weapon with limited functionality. I have not seen a great many people using those weapons in any kind of scenario. I personally have not found a lot of utility out of it. It was fun for an interesting new shiny, but again, it wasn't particularly an effective shiny. In this case, now I've got a gun which all early reports seem to state that this is a particularly effective gun that you would want to be using in combat, and people are going to want to buy this. And this means that chances are that this promo is probably going to be one of the most lucrative ones for the developers that they've had in some time. The fact that there are so many promos seems to suggest that, to be quite honest, they're probably not making as much money out of these as they would like to be doing. This game is probably kind of struggling, just judging by the sheer frequency of promos, it would seem to suggest that perhaps these promotions are not necessarily bringing in as much money to the game as they might like. So this one is likely to bring in a lot more money than any other previously. And purely from a business standpoint, that basically means that we're going to see these promos again. It would make a lot of sense for 3 Rings to run more promos like this in which they give us items in exchange for real money. Now, hopefully the route that they will take is that these will be almost like a limited period exclusivity thing, whereas give it 2 months or so and they'll run another promo in which we can get an item which is a reskin of the Mix Master, but can be acquired through standard means, through trading in some tokens for something, or just standard crafting, what have you. Maybe they'll make an appearance in the Gunner update, who knows, these could be things as well. These are all options, and hopefully, if we're lucky, this is the route 3 Rings will take, but if they decide to keep this as an exclusive weapon till the end of time and we never see another version of the Mix Master, that's slightly more concerning. And again, with the potential for this kind of promo to be run again in the future, that very much leads down the path of people very comfortably being able to call this game pay to win. And unfortunately, that tends to be a label that drives a lot of people away from a game. When people play a game and other people report back and you say, oh, how's this game? How is it? Is it any good? What is it worth playing? And they're like, nah, it's pay to win. No. Everybody who throws real money at it just comes away with better weapons and better equipment, and they just beat everybody else. Well, that's not good reputation for a game to have. That's not something you want to see. It's going to hurt the game in the long run, I feel. In the short term, absolutely, it's going to do plenty for 3 Rings. They'll have more income coming in, which will allow them to do more with the game, but I think in the long run, it could give them very much a reputation that would harm the game, and hopefully not, but potentially ruin it, which is kind of a concern. From a consumer standpoint, I think if you wanted to oppose this promo, the thing you would need to do is to vote with your wallet. And I know that's an expression that gets bandied about a lot in PC gaming circles. When a developer or publisher makes a bad choice, something that's detrimental to the consumer, we're told every time, vote with your wallet, don't buy their products, but people always do, because the standard counter-argument is, but I want to play with this product. Sure, it's a slight inconvenience, but I really want to play this game, or in this case, use this weapon. So I will take the slight inconvenience of paying a bit extra money because they've asked for it in order to be able to use this, or play this, or do whatever the developer has asked the consumer to do in order to be able to use whatever they're offering, in spite of the fact that it's hurting the consumer. And it sets a bad precedent each time. Every time the developer or publisher does something that hurts the consumer, and they get away with it by selling a lot of them, it just sends the message that it's okay to do this, we can do this again, and people will buy into it again and again and again, and we can make some more money by doing it this way. And the only way to actually stop these kind of trends is to, well, not to buy into it. So that's my thoughts. Personally, you might be okay with this. If you're okay with this, please buy into it. If you're in any way, shape or form not okay with this, then I would absolutely urge you to please hold off on buying it. No matter how tempted you might be to try and go for one of these guns, hold off on it and don't buy it, because you're supporting bad business practices by doing so. At any rate, that's my thoughts on the new promo. It would have been rather nice to have been able to actually get a hold of one of these weapons and give you a bit of a weapon demonstration, but unfortunately, by the nature of the promo, it's just a little bit out of my price range, so I'm not likely to get my hands on an Overcharged Mix Master anytime in the near future. But if nothing else, I can offer my thoughts on it from a more of a business and perhaps a philosophical standpoint. And please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you agree or disagree, whatever the case might be, let me know what you think about the current prize box promo in the comments below. And hopefully I shall be back with you with some better news in the near future. So thank you very much for watching. I've been Maroka, and I'll see you next time. Yeah!